Yeah, good to go. Let's start.
Hi, all. Welcome to yet another session hosted by our PMIK chapter. I remember reading a quote some time back. Operations keep the lights on. Strategy provides a light at the end of the tunnel. But project management is the train engine that moves the organization forward. You're not supposed to be resting or having fun on a Sunday, isn't it? But here we are, a handful of like-minded people who are seeking to enrich our knowledge. To fulfill this thirst, we have a very special person with us to help on this. Having said that, I call upon Jay Kishore, our President, PMIK, to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining a special session on the evolution of Pmbok Guide. In 1969, when PMI was founded, project management was not recognized as a profession. It evolved, grew a lot, and it's contributing and supporting the community across the globe, creating standards, taking up research, sharing knowledge, conducting webinars, knowledge sharing sessions, and plenty of things. And today, we have a very special person who was instrumental in all these achievements for project management community. He was one among the people who founded the golden standard of project management, the PMP certification. The PMP, the certification, and the Pmbok guide was always a mystery for us. How it is evolving, how it is making sure that the project management profession and the community is leading forward because of the contributions and the thought process from the visionaries. And this person, Dr. Lee Lambert, is a primary man in making sure that it is moving forward. And he is a PMI fellow. He was a man of project management, professional development, and he was recognized by PMI in many ways. And thank you here as a member of PMI Kerala chapter, Lee. And thank you for all the support you're offering for all the initiatives of PMI Kerala chapter. I welcome you to this special session, maybe unique session on how the Pmbok guide has evolved till Pmbok 7. You have seen that journey. Welcome, and over to you, Lee.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. This is a very special presentation for me. A lot of people in the world don't really know the true story behind PMBoK and then eventually the PMP. And so I always enjoy being able to share what I consider the truth about this process. It's all turned out very well, but it didn't start out under the ground rules as you might think. When I joined the PMI in 1978, of course, there was no PMBoK, there was no PMP, there was really not much of anything other than a bunch of people that got together once a month and chatted about project management. But in 1981, I was invited to participate as one of the key contributors to the creation of this project management professional curriculum. We have more than 1.3 million of in the world today. And so I took on to that wholeheartedly. I thought this is really something that is needed. We need to be able to validate that people who say they're project managers can actually prove that by the level of certification that they may have. Now, I do need to point out to you that there was no PMBoK at that time. So from 1984, we rolled out the first version of the PMP exam, which I think 55 people sat for, and 39 of those became PMPs. At that time, there was no standard against which we were testing. Now, Bill Duncan and Lou Ireland and Max Weidman had done a lot of work early on in establishing the frameworks and white papers and all the things that go along with it, but there was no official PMBoK. And until 1996, when Bill Duncan became the sort of lead author of the first formal PMBoK, which, by the way, I posted a copy of that PMBoK early this year, and it got over 100,000 views. So there were that many people that really had no idea where that PMBoK came from. So we got that out in 1996. Well, we'd already been testing people for 12 years. And in fact, one of the decisions we made that I don't think too many people are aware of is that the PMP was really created as a way to stimulate membership in the PMI. We had been in existence since '69, and by 1980, membership had flattened and actually in some cases gone down. And so we were looking for a way to stimulate interest in PMI. And so we did a lot of interviews around the country, talking to other professional associations, and almost to a separate one, they all said, what you need is a certification program, because that draws interest to that specific organization, and you'll be the only one that has one. So that's what we decided to do. So when we started out on our journey for the PMP, it really wasn't about professional certification as much as it was about finding a way to stimulate membership in our PMI organization. Now, in order to do that, of course, we had to make the ability to take the exam for the PMP credential tied to being a member of the PMI organization. So the theory was, if you wanted to be a certified project manager, then you'd have to join PMI, and that would stimulate our growth. Well, it didn't work out quite that way. After 10 years of the PMP, from 1984 to 1995, we only had a total of 6,000 PMPs. So, I mean, that's nowadays, we test that many in a day sometimes. So 6,000, we started to look at that, and Davidson Frank had taken over some of the responsibilities when our creator, Dr. Dean Martin from Western Carolina University, had unfortunately died of a heart attack. Then Davidson stepped in and started to so one of them be in charge of that process. The first things we did was we said, I think we should eliminate the requirement to be a PMI member to be able to take this exam. We had heard that the MBAs and the people that had been in project management for a while but weren't necessarily interested in joining another organization were very interested in becoming PMP certified. So we did that. We dropped the requirement that you need to be a PMI member, and the results were astounding. Member participation in the PMP went up exponentially. We started to get thousands of new PMPs. It started to take on a life of its own in professional organizations that suggested and recommended that project management had started to come into its own in terms of a profession. We had made great efforts to change that from a hobby, something you did in your regular time, in your spare time from your real job, into an actual profession. And it had started to make that turn, and we started to see those numbers go up significantly. Well, in the same part of that process, the PMBoK began to change, began to adapt itself to more professionalism. We added body of knowledge areas. It started out in the 1996 framework with 8 body of knowledge areas, and then it expanded to 10 body of knowledge areas, and those 10 became fairly constant for the next up until this 7th edition came out. And so every 4 years we would take a look at the PMBoK to make sure that we were incorporating any changes in the profession that had taken place. Now, we formed the PMBoK as a process organization. So the book was organized in the way of process, provided outcomes. And that was the early formation version. Approximately every 4 years, the PMBoK went through a rather substantial revision. And oftentimes the revision was the opinion of people who wanted their name associated with the revision. They felt like they had worthwhile things to add to the PMBoK. And so what you saw happening was a very interesting phenomenon. The basic body of knowledge really didn't change that much over the years, but we started with 119 pages in 1996. And the 6th edition, which is on those 4-year cycles, the 6th edition had nearly 800 pages. So it went from 119 to nearly 100 pages during the course of those revisions from Rev 1 to Rev 6, okay? And so, unfortunately, what had happened, and because I'm the last standing member of the original group that formed the PMP, because I took such an interest in that, I could see what was going on, and the exam for the PMP had started to turn into a memorization exercise. And so we started to see that if anybody could actually memorize the contents of the 4th, 5th, 6th edition, the probability of them passing the exam was relatively high. And so all of a sudden we started to see PMPs being named that when they came under stress, it turns out that they didn't really know as much about PMP as we would certainly like to. Remember, the PMP is supposed to be a statement that confirms you as a professional that have the experience and the knowledge to manage projects. That's kind of what it was all about. And when we first started, I lobbied heavily for the project management professional, PMP, as opposed to PPM, professional project manager, because I felt like you may never be the project manager, but if you're working on a project team, you need to understand what's going on. You need to have the knowledge to know why the project manager is making the decision that he or she is making. And so I said, no, it's really more than just one person, more than a project manager. It's anybody and everybody that works on project teams, that has project work that they're responsible for. So eventually, the rest of the committee, and it included some past presidents, the rest of the committee, I was going to say caved in. They agreed with me. And so that's why we ended up with the name as it is. And I think it says a lot. It says that out of the 1.3 million PMPs, I think you'd find that there's quite a substantial number of them who may never be the project manager, but yet they've taken the initiative to become PMP certified. Well, we started to learn that that's not that hard to do if you know how to memorize key points, if you know how to prepare for an exam you can probably pass the PMP exam with very little hands-on experience in project management. And we found that to be true. We started to hear, as I would go out on speaking engagements, I would make a simple little comment to a group. I would say, how many of you are PMPs? And of course, all the hands shot up. Everybody's proud to be a PMP. The hands shot up. And then I said, okay, now I have another question. How many of you work with PMPs who aren't? And a lot of hands went up on that too. And that's confirmation that the people they work with have demonstrated they're not really PMPs. And so this built up over the years. It built up through the 4th edition, through the 5th edition, and then all the vendors, all the what were REPs at the time, Registered Education Providers, all the vendors started to really realize all they really had to do is put together a course preparation that emphasized core management memorization. And all of a sudden, the number of passing went up, the rate of passing went up, the number of PMPs went up, and people began to become concerned. People like me, people that have been truly demonstrated project managers for years started to wonder, what are we doing here? Is our job to create massive numbers of PMPs, or is it to represent the professional in the organization? So lots of PMPs, and I'm not pointing any fingers at any of you in the audience or anybody in the Kerala organization, but I'm just saying lots of PMPs aren't. They passed the exam. That's great. I love that. I'm happy for them. But that should be the beginning, not the end. I've always told my PMP people that passing the exam is the beginning of your journey as a project manager, not the end. And so it started to take a toll, and PMI began to get dramatically criticized for the number of PMPs, for the test mechanism that was being used, and they tried to update it and keep it very robust. But the fact of the matter is, it still was based on the PMBoK that was organized in these 10 body of knowledge areas and based on process groups as opposed to actual outcomes of the effort of project management. So there began to be a lot of pressure to reorganize the PMBoK. Now, you may know from this last version that was released, it was released over a year late. And part of that is to meet some ANSI requirements for standardization. But a lot of it was also because it's such a dramatic revision of what we've worked with since 1996 that it was intended to change the playing field, to level the playing field to where it was going to be based on the way we should do projects, the way we should be thinking about projects, which then required not only the revision of the PMBoK, but the revision of the exam that goes along with the PMBoK. And so that exam's changed to incorporate other things like Agile and some of the things that we've seen happen over the last 6-8 years. And so the new exam is in line with the 7th edition of the PMBoK. And what you'll see is, and I'm going to go through that PMBoK in some detail, what you're going to see is it would be extremely difficult to pass that exam through memorization, because the PMBoK is now written in a way that you do projects and what you should be thinking about for projects. So if we think about how that rolled out, the testing, I don't know that there's been enough testing data. We just started utilizing this test in January, I believe. And then testing data has not really been defined yet. So I'm not sure what the pass rates are. I'm not sure what the feedback from people sitting for the exam have been. I know there were a lot of people caught in the middle. They'd been preparing for the 6th edition to take the test based on the 6th, and this kind of changed in midstream. And so there were some complaints about having to reconfigure their studying. But, you know, that's change always catches somebody. And so we've got the new 7th edition out now. Now, what they've done, in addition to splitting it up into the body of knowledge and standards, which I'll get into in a minute, they've also, PMI being they have also taken most of what you would have found in the 6th edition in terms of the process side, and roll that into something called Standards Plus. And Standards Plus is a separate digital document that PMI has created. So if anybody needs to look at the how of how you do some of the things that are identified as the what and why in the new PMBoK, then they've got this Standards Plus document available. Now, the beauty of the Standards Plus is it doesn't have to wait for 4 years or 3. It doesn't have to wait at all to be kept updated all the time. It's not a hard copy document. It's a digital document, and it is updated whenever anything significant changes from the standards perspective. They can go into that and revise it, so you constantly have current information. It's very easily accessible, very easy to find what you're looking for. I had a chance to review it for PMI. I found it to be outstanding, and I found it to be very thoughtful on PMI's part to not just discard all that stuff that was in 6th edition, but actually create a separate way that people who are very familiar with that 6th edition can still find the information that they're looking for. So pay attention to that if you start to use it, and realize it's a very new, very exciting document. Now, here's what happened. When we went from 6 to 7, I remember 6 was about 800 pages, okay? Well, when they pulled all that stuff out and put it in Standards Plus, when they did all of that, the PMBoK went down to about 300 pages. When they rewrote the format and made it about what and why rather than how, it reduced it to about 300 pages. And that's even in 2 separate components. The project management standard, which is the kind of the standard that we are consistent with, is part of the new PMBoK, the 7th edition, and the rest of it is the actual PMBoK content. So if you're in the situation where you're either now just beginning to prepare for testing, you're going to have to really be aware of what these changes are. And what PMI's done is to make their point, rather than just having the PMBoK be the reference, they now identify approximately 10 documents, all of which become valid references for anyone studying to sit for the exam. So now it's not PMBoK 6, PMBoK 7, it's PMBoK 6 and 7, although 6 has now been put to bed as of yesterday. It's been put to bed, and so it'll be the 7th edition, and anything out of the 6th edition you can find in that new Standards Plus document. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the slides up for the 7th edition, because I reviewed it too. I had a chance to review some of this stuff, and the fact of the matter is, it's dynamite. It's actually It's actually the way it probably should have been for years. And now they've got it in a format where it's pretty darn easy for people to follow through and understand a lot better, understand about project management. So as we look at these slides, I'll try to go through the major situation of change, but you'll be able to see quite quickly how that all shakes out. So if you at this particular slide, you can see that what we've done here, look at, is we've gone from the process to the principle orientation. So rather than the groups that we've, gosh, how many years have we dealt with that? Now we have a situation where it's based on the based on that. It's not the process anymore. It's based on principles of what it takes to do the job effectively. It's how important it is to make that change. Let's see if I can enlarge this a little bit. My eyes are not as good as they once were. Is there any way to enlarge this, people, so we can get a little bit bigger? I mean, I'm an old guy. I don't have pressure. What we're talking about from the 6th edition to the 7th edition. So there's a transformation between those two. The idea that we could get into the principle Pmbok based. And so we look at that and you can see each of these areas that have gone down through change. And the only one that really consistent was the project. It's good for most every project. Either way, it was geared towards projects that were going to be able to be run in that way. But what they've done, gone to domains, gone to principles and domain-based groups, different process, and these components you can see by following the left hand, each of the side, which is basically the 6 following from 6 on all previous editions for that matter, and then follow that over to the right, which is now what the 7th edition consists of. You can begin to see the dramatic changes and why a lot of people weren't happy with it. A lot of people are old like me, and they've been with the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, on through the 6th for all these. We've been working years and into a whole new environment. But our position now was that this was a necessary change. Was as this and PMI, this was a way to roll into the new approach. And if we weren't rolling into it, we'd be left behind. And so this gives you the framework behind work for where these changes were very easy to understand and easy to follow, and not that difficult, easy to follow. And it's a change. Now we know, because we're heavily involved in change management right now. That's one of the hot topics in project management is change management. This is a change, no doubt about that. This is a significant change. And so for those of you, even if you've already got your PMP, there's going the 7th edition and those editions that come after it. So you, even with the okay, and the 7th. Slide, please. Okay, so here's the breakdown that I gave you early on. And this is the idea that the project management standard, which is really consistent with the worldwide standard for project management, is broken out into the introduction, of course, and then the value delivery system. This is something for us old timers we never really talked much about value delivery. We talked about getting the darn job done. But what we've found is a lot of projects that we're doing aren't delivering value to the organization. They're consuming resources, they're consuming time, and we get them done and everybody feels good about it. But then when we step back and say, well, what did this do for the organization? What did it do to help meet the objectives of the organization? And what we found was, not a lot. I mean, we got it done. We got it done on time. We got it done in budget. But the fact of the matter is the deliverable didn't add any substantial value to the organization. So we've got taken a very hard look at the value delivery. Now, this is a big component in Agile. If you're an Agile person, then you realize already that value is something we take a hard look at as we begin to plan our Agile projects. What's it going to return to the organization? So the value delivery system is a key component to the project management standard. So then we look at that and we say, okay, then we break that down into project management principles, the things that are important on every project, the things that we should be thinking about on every project. And so those are the three main categories of the project management standards that are contained in the PMBoK. So they're consistent with the worldwide standards, and that's one of the reasons it got held up a year late. I mean, people were being very critical of PMI, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of it had to do with making sure that we were consistent with the worldwide standard. Okay, so that's the first part. Now the second part's the one that is everybody's really important and worried about, and that's the PMBoK. That's the new version of the PMBoK, and that's what we have to look at. We have to look at all these three things. Okay, project performance domains. If you're going to deal with project performance, and that's everything we do, we want to be able to measure performance against a plan, then we have to think about all of these domains. And I'm going to go through each of them in some detail with you. And then we've got a new concept that we added in the old 6th edition. It was very structured. It was very prescriptive, they call it, telling you how it looked, how it had to be, how it had to be done. Well, now we're saying, hey, we want to allow for tailoring. We want to allow the project environment to tailor the project management to match the project and the environment in which it's being conducted. So this is a very substantial add. And I've always said that, one size doesn't fit all. It never has and it never will. And so now we've said, yeah, we agree with that. And we're going to put in a component called tailoring. And so individual project people will have the opportunity to tailor their project to meet the needs and capabilities and environment in which it's being done. And I think that's important for us to understand. And then lastly, we've got I'm having a hard time reading that just to be sure I get it right. Yikes. What's that last element? I can't see it. I'm sorry. Methods, models, and artifacts. Methods, models, and artifacts. Well, that's pretty straightforward. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to make sure that we know what those methods, what those approaches are, and what artifacts do they produce? What do they really give us in the way of supporting our project management capability? Remember, one of the things is that the whole objective of project management is to create a framework in which we can so that we can make conscious decisions about what the status is and what the impact of that will be. And I'm not sure that everybody gets it. Use this information we've got to be able to use information to improve the way our projects are conducted. So when we talk about performance measurement, well, the reason we're measuring performance is to be able to identify what steps need to be taken downstream to assure us that we're going to be delivering what we agreed to deliver to the organization. So let's look at this next slide that deals a little bit more with this project management standard. Now, this is an important slide because it identifies the fact that you can use this with modification on any portfolio. In other words, each portfolio does not have to be mirror image of the other. It gives you the flexibility to be able to apply these concepts appropriately. So this layout gives you the idea that, hey, depending upon the work and what needs to be done, I may take a slightly different methodology to be able to complete that work that is still approach a slightly to consistent the standard that's been produced. Now, the next slide gives you the principles, and that's really the one that has a lot to do with the changes that have to do taking place in the PMBoK, because the taste is so dramatically different than the process-based PMBoK that it's good to understand what those principles are. So if you can give me the principle-based slide, I would appreciate it. Now you'll see when we get this slide up that it's completely different. It's not anywhere at all similar to the way it used to be done. Now you can see there's a heck of a lot of principles associated with project management. And if you go down each of these, you can begin to see that some of them are relatively similar, but not all. And in fact, we have about 12 altogether of the principles that all need to be considered in your thinking about project management. And it depends on where you are in the project, what it is you're trying to accomplish. And all of these are integral parts of the new PMBoK. And so you need to be aware of what each of these are. If you have your PMBoK, which I'm sure you do, if you don't, you should get one. You can go into the detail within the PMBoK, and it identifies each of these principles in a way that makes it perfectly clear what they were intended to do. Now, we didn't have this in the 6th edition. We may have had a couple of things that sort of skirted around these topics, but these are totally new. These are consistent with what the people we've referred to. Hundreds of people participated in this creation of this new principle-based PMBoK. And so these principles come from people who have incredible amounts of knowledge about how projects should really be run. and how these principles pay in to what it is we're trying to get accomplished with each of the projects that we run, capitalizing on these principles. So that's something that we have to pay serious attention to if we're going to become efficient at utilizing, or even to some extent understanding the impacts of the new PMBoK. These principles can have dramatic effect for the good, by the way, positive impact on your ability to get projects done effectively and deliver more value to the sponsoring organization. So that's the contact between all of these principles, and they're all different. They all stand on their own, but there's a lot of integration that takes place, as you might imagine, with the principles on this particular condition. So let's take a look now at the PMBoK itself and see what we have there when it comes to the components of that particular side of the new PMBoK. Now, this is the part of the PMBoK that really is so small in number of pages that oftentimes people go like, "That's impossible. That can't be as good or as comprehensive as the old PMBoK way of doing business." But that's not true. If you look at the domains, they cover the same domains that we have been talking about for an awfully long period of time. Like they cover the domains in a different way. They call them something different if you look at them. But as the fact of the matter is, they're all the same things but we've divided it into various domains for the we've been doing for years. Now we have very specific domains on a particular situation like for you. There we go. I'm trying to get an enlarged version of this out for so I can talk to it with some specificity. However, it doesn't seem to be functioning the way I would like it to. So I want to talk about the domains. The domains are actually the key. The domains set up how we actually conduct of this operation. So I want to make sure I can talk to those in some detail. Let's see if I can get this to come up. Exit. Okay. Go away. I'm going to get it enlarged for you. Won't be but a second here. Don't be trying to. Okay, I cannot get them enlarged. I need you to me someone just tell me as we go around from right to left the name of each domain, because I can't see it and I don't have a book to do it. Hold on, I'll go get my PMBoK. That'll do it. I'm back with my PMBoK, so I know it's right now. This time to make sure you because I think these are the key. Sure you get it, because I think so the principle base is kind of a configure everything together, but the performance are what we really use those domains to deliver projects. Okay, so first one on the list here, stakeholders. My gosh, do we ever beat the stakeholders? I mean, we use that term for everything, and there's the death of everything. The reason we do is because pretty much everybody's a stakeholder. Even if they're working on a specific project, they're not working. They could easily be stakeholder, be for the deliverable, for the thing that's going to be coming out. So they have an interest in that role. So the stakeholder group is something we have to identify. Not only are they oftentimes the ones who receive the value of the project, but oftentimes they can impact the ability to execute the project. So we have to define stakeholders. We've told you for years before this PMBoK, you need to do a stakeholder study. You need to know who all your stakeholders are, what their stakes are, and then how are you going to communicate with them regarding those stakes. So the stakeholder is an extremely important domain. Now, we didn't have it as a domain before. We had it as a piece of work that needed to be done. Again, process oriented, prescriptive oriented. So now we've got that. Now, the team, remember, when we talk about project management, we talk about teamwork. Teams get projects done. Individuals don't get projects done. And in fact, team leaders, project managers don't get projects done. They direct the efforts of others who do get them done. So again, when we form our team, our project team, I constantly remind people it's just like the sporting events. One person, one superstar does not make a winning team. So we have to deal with all the team members, make sure that they're aware, make sure that we've incorporated them into the communication process. It's really important that we recognize how all of those domains come together to make things happen appropriately. Okay. Now we have development approach of the life cycle. That's old. That's kind of old news. That's not anything really new. This lends itself sometimes more to agile than it does to predictive projects, but nonetheless, it works for both. Now, planning. Here's where projects go south, because they don't do planning. They really don't. I've been in the project management world for 55 years. Now that's before some of you were born. Okay. So I've been doing it for quite a little while. And what I see in almost half the projects is totally inadequate planning. And then when we start to have things go wrong, we can't figure out why. So planning, we have to invest front end time in planning. Now, management doesn't see this. They're not totally on board with taking time to plan. They'd rather start and adjust on the way. Well, I'm telling you, if you don't take the time to plan, then you're going to be in a world of hurt, because you're going to find out that you didn't anticipate something. It's going to have a dramatic impact. It's too late to fix it. So planning, invest the planning. Say, no, we're not starting yet until we're done planning. Be assertive. Be assertive. I built a career about being assertive. If I didn't think it was the right thing to do, I became assertive. So I encourage you to do the same. I mean, try to make sure that you're right, obviously. But I think that the planning must improve. I think if we're going to really take advantage of this new PMBoK orientation and the way it's organized, then planning is going to be a key element, okay? Now, project work, you know what that is. That's the work breakdown structure. That's the definition of all the work that has to be done. Now, remember, if you're in an agile environment, we don't identify all the work. We identify the short term. We have sprints. We have stand-up meetings to get that done. And then we pull in some of the detail for the out time frame. A little different for predictive. Predictive, we try to plan a little bit more, although we can use something called a rolling wave planning that lets us do basically the same thing Agile does in terms of detailed work. So that's the idea behind project work. I've said, in fact, I just made this statement yesterday on a webinar, that if you don't have a work breakdown structure well defined, there's about a 60% chance your project's going to fail. 60% chance that your project will fail if you haven't developed a reasonably good work breakdown structure, okay? Identifying all the project work that has to be done, okay? Then we have delivery. The delivery, this is an important element that we have to understand, not only to whom the delivery should go, but we have to understand what the delivery looks like. What's the end product of our effort that goes to the community that is trying to benefit from the value of the project? We have to make sure that that's defined in a way that measurement can be made, that determination can be made. Now remember, because we try to define the value delivery system, then we want to be able to confirm that we in fact delivered the value that we intended to deliver for that project. So it's very important to link those things together. Now measurement, this is, if you're going to find out how you're doing and you take the time to create a plan, then you also should take the time to determine what's the most realistic measurement approach. Do I measure daily, weekly, monthly? Do I use earned value systems? Do I use PERT evaluation? Do I use critical path? There's so many measurement capabilities that we have to make a decision in advance to be able to do that. Again, in the webinar yesterday, I pointed out that if you don't have an integrated logic network schedule that shows workflow through time, then you're asking for trouble, because you can't optimize the flow of work based on status. You can't determine what the impact on the critical path is because of status. So all of these things are parts of this measurement that we have to pay attention to. Now, the last one is one that I think we sell it short. I really do. This is risk management, essentially, the uncertainty. Now, if you've been in the business long enough, you know that risk equals uncertainty. If it's not uncertain, there really can't be risk associated with it in most cases. If it's not uncertain, that means you know the answer. So uncertainty defines risk. So the level of uncertainty then becomes the critical issue. If you're 90% sure that you understand what the deliverable is, what the planning method is, all the variables of the domains, then the risk impacts will be minimized. But the one area there's two things we don't do. We don't really do a good job of risk analysis because some of the answers will shock you. And the other thing we don't do is we don't necessarily understand that a risk event happening today not just affects the risk event for today, but everything downstream that's connected to that risk. So we could have, it's called the domino effect. So we could have a risk that appears to be not really that big a thing, relatively small, but as we look at the domino effect and it ripples its way through 4 or 5 or 6 other work packages, suddenly you have a major impact that's been driven by a small level of uncertainty. So we can't just stop with the one uncertain item. We have to look at it from the total perspective. Again, the benefit of good planning so that everything's linked together in an appropriate way. So the impact on work package A can be seen on work package D without having to go to too much trouble. So these are the domains. These are the project performance domains. And for us to plan a project without considering these domains is to ask for problems. Now, if you want to be a successful project manager, and if you want to have your projects deliver value, then you don't really have an option. If you look back at the old PMBoks, there were a lot of this they didn't do. They didn't have these terms and terminology. They were very prescriptive, and you should do this. This gives you the freedom to remember we said you have the ability to tailor. So you can tailor what you have in a way that's consistent with the work that you're doing. Whether you're doing Agile or Scrum or predictive work or hybrid, these things fit on those applications because you make them fit. You have them fit the environment that you're in. And therefore, you will be in a position where you can capitalize on the 7th edition of the PMBoK. And it's a major breakthrough. And I think a lot of people have begun to realize this is significant. This really prepares people to manage projects in the way that most of us have always thought projects should be managed, but we had to be consistent with the old PMBoK, and therefore oftentimes did them a little bit differently than we would have liked to from an individual perspective. So that's sort of the history of it, and it relates to the PMBoK in that it's a major change. I mean, this could be categorized as version 1 of the new PMBoK, but it's not. It's 7th edition. How often will we revise this new edition? I've not heard a committed time frame. I'm sure it won't be every 4 years. I think it can be more current than that, but the Standards Plus will definitely be more current than that. And so we've got a situation where we can stay relevant in a shorter period of time. Sometimes by the time we got to the end of the PMBoK, it's time for a new revision, there were a lot of things in it that didn't really apply anymore. So this gives us the opportunity to stay current, to study the PMBoK 7 as it applies to the work you're going to do. And then what I say is, by the way, it will also prepare you. If you look at the other 9 or 10 reference documents that PMI provides, if you look at the exam outline that has been prepared for the new exam, all of those things are going to help you be prepared. And I think you're going to see less quantity of people passing in bunches, although I write a letter of congratulations pretty much every day to new PMPs, and I'm writing 10 or 12 a day. So the interest and the success has not waned substantially at this time. Now, maybe it will in the next year, but I think there's still a tremendous level of interest in the PMBoK and subsequently in the project management professional, the PMP standard, over and above the 1.3 million. Now we have lots of other credentials, lots of other standards. We have micro credentials now. So there's plenty of opportunities for someone who doesn't feel they need the PMP, but would like to beef up some of the areas in their career path. I think PMI has provided many opportunities where you could, in fact, be improved in those areas without having to go to the length of earning your PMP. Okay, well, that's all I have to present today, and I'll happily take questions if you have any regarding this topic. I think I'm staying on top of it pretty well.
Participants, if anybody got any questions, can you just post it on the chat so that we can pick it up from there? Please post it on the chat. Anybody got any questions? MJ, I think you can take over. Oh, there is one question. Is there any need for PMBoK guide for each industry? That is the question. Is there any need for PMBoK?
I guess I should remind you, PMBoK 8.
PMBoK guide for every industry. Is there a requirement based on industry?
Well, there's been a lot of pressure to create PMBoKs for specific industries. I think at this point, other than perhaps the construction industry, there's been no serious movement towards doing that. Now, with the effort that Grace Najjar is doing in MENA for the construction industry, that may evolve to be the case because they do have some specific unique requirements. But otherwise, I've not heard any discussion about that.
All right. Thanks, Lee. MJ, over to you. MJ, I think there is some audio issues at your end. We can't hear you. Can you try now? I think there was some network issue in between. Can you try now? No, sorry, we can't.
Can you hear now?
No, MJ, I think there is some serious audio issue at your end. We can't hear you. So I would like to invite Ms. Akhila to convey the thanks. Akhila, over to you.
Thank you, Hari. I'm sure all will agree that we could not have had a better speaker than our Lee for taking us through this 7th edition changes of PMBoK. So, and how well he has taken us through that changes and highlighted the importance of this very very much required change to agile, incorporating the agile in the PMBoK. That is great. Thank you so much, Lee, for taking time and sharing within this short time the entire gist of the change that has been brought about, and also highlighting very clearly that the standards plus is a real time change, updated one, and so we are going to be staying relevant always with the PMBoK and the documents provided by PMI. Thank you so much, Lee, for this enlightening session and walkthrough of PMBoK 7th edition. And very sorry that we had a technical glitch last time, and thanks to all participants for joining back with us today with great enthusiasm and ensuring that you also take benefit of Lee's session. And Lee has always been our support, great support for us. Thank you, Lee, for encouraging Kerala chapter and its initiatives also. And we look forward to you being with us always as a guiding light. And thanks to all participants, MJ, we had a great session today. I believe we'll have follow-up sessions as when required by the requirements posted by our members. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks
Akhila.
for having me. I appreciate it very much. I enjoy working. Thanks for having. Appreciate it very much with you folks all the time.
Thank you, Lee. That's really nice of you. Thanks, Akhila. Thanks for the conveying vote of thanks on behalf of PMI Kerala. And I would like to thank all the participants for your patience and attending this session. And I once again thank everyone for attending this session. Thanks, Lee, to have a wonderful session on PMBoK, and hope to host happy to host you again soon. All right. With that, we come to end of the session. Thanks everyone once again. I'll end the session, and the PDF codes for this session will be shared through email. Thank you all. Bye.